Kawhi Leonard just had one of the best shot-making performances the game of basketball has ever seen. 19 attempts, 15 makes, 39 points in a crunch time win to steal home court advantage. But outside of the superhuman shot making, what factors led to such a ridiculous performance, and how can the Nuggets adjust their defense to prevent it from happening again in Game 3? Of course, Kawhi likes to operate in that mid-post area, and on his very first touch in Game 1, Denver showed that they were going to very aggressively cheat to his side of the floor to not let him attack in space, essentially forcing him to get rid of the ball. Here it was again a few minutes later. He starts to post up, Jokic abandons Zubac to help, and this is a risky strategy because if the ball finds its way to the opposite side of the floor, it creates a long closeout, and now the defense is in rotation. It makes sense to deploy this type of defense against Kawhi in particular though. The best way to beat this coverage is to make that tough corner-to-corner skip pass, which isn't a read he's comfortable making consistently, so they're able to really sit in his lanes, then forcing him to beat them with tough shots over the top. Compare that to a play from the second half where the defense doesn't load up and he's got room to put the ball down. A late double instead comes from up top, and he finds Norman Powell for a really good look from 3. Powell's maybe the last guy you want taking a spot-up jumper if you're the Nuggets, and that's part of the reason why loading up early worked so well. Even if Kawhi made that pass to the opposite corner, it was either finding Derrick Jones Jr. or Chris Dunn, who Denver's willing to live with. So anytime Kawhi found himself operating from an empty side, the defense was able to limit his ability to get to a shot while forcing weaker shooters to beat them from the outside. In Game 2, however, the Clippers made some minor tweaks. Instead of having their weakest shooter spot up in the corner, they moved that guy to the opposite wing. Now when they load up early, it's a much easier pass for Kawhi, and it's a longer recovery to close out on a jumper. Not only is it an easier pass to make, it puts more stress on Denver to protect the corner because they don't want a guy like Batum getting an open 3. So now Zubac is in a position to flash to the middle of the paint where he's an easy target for automatic offense. In the event that they did find themselves in that original setup with their weakest shooter in the corner, that's when they'd have whoever was on the opposite wing cut to the middle of the floor, which again is an easy target for a great shot. There were a few times though where they ended up in that same spot as Game 1. A weaker shooter in the corner, nobody cutting from the slot, and that's when Kawhi had nowhere else to turn to but a really difficult shot. That's what happened on this play from the third. He starts to post up Jamal, and the Nuggets have completely abandoned Dunn on the opposite side to wall off his attack. Then he responds by turning over his right shoulder for a jumper in Jokic's grill. Now feels like a good time to mention that the key to Kawhi's performance in Game 2 was simply making everything. And no, that isn't an exaggeration. Whether it was a turnaround jumper or a pull-up 3 in transition, it was like the guy had a magnet on the rim. Just take a look at this shot to end the first half. I'm not even sure if it's possible to get a better contest, only for him to absolutely drill it. Then in the closing minutes, he found himself in a packed paint with the shot clock ticking down, only to turn around and hit a smothered jumper over the top of Gordon. Like I said earlier, he shot 15 of 19, or about 79% from the field. If we break it up by shot type, we're looking at 11 of 12 from 2 and 4 of 7 from 3, which honestly doesn't even sound real, but I think the most impressive part is that only one of those 2-pointers came at the rim, meaning that in this game, he shot 10 of 11, or 91% on mid-range jumpers. Talk about unconscious shot making. It's not as simple as Kawhi just making shots though. He was also making his shots in Game 1. It's the process behind how he got to those shots and how it impacted the team's overall offense that really changed. Going back to the first game, like I said, those empty side post-ups were pretty much getting bottled up, so the Clippers had to explore other avenues. One thing they tried quite a bit was the 2-man game between him and Zoo. Anytime he came off a screen, Jokic was jumping out to the ball in an aggressive hedge, so ideally you're able to get the ball to Zoo in the short roll with a 4-on-3 advantage. The Nuggets did an incredible job of rotating out of these actions though. When Kawhi draws 2 and hits Zoo, Porter comes over from the weak side to meet him early, while Jokic recovers to take away Dunn at the rim, then the play resets without an advantage. Here's another example. Kawhi draws 2, Gordon cheats over to tag the roll, and Bogdanovic relocates to the wing where he's wide open, but Kawhi misses him, tries to force the issue on a drive, then picks up one of his 7 turnovers. I don't want to make it sound like there weren't any good possessions though. Here's one where everything falls together perfectly, countering Denver's rotation with multiple extra passes to find an open Bogdanovic for a quality 3, but even on the few times they ran it in game 2, the Nuggets did a really good job of shrinking the floor in help, forcing tough decisions, and ultimately prevented the Clippers from consistently creating advantages. So if it wasn't in the mid post or out of the pick and roll, where would Kawhi create his own offense? Well, one counter is to simply attack before the defense can get properly set up. And this was a theme we saw from him in both games 1 and 2. By playing fast, there's a pretty good chance you'll end up with a cross match like Jokic picking him up on this one, and that's just an automatic blow by. But the bigger thing is that the defense isn't able to load up in the way they want to, meaning that his defender has to overplay the drive, making it easier for him to create space from outside. And maybe that's sort of a segue into how they unleashed Kawhi in the half court, because instead of trying to play from an empty side, they started clearing out for him to operate in the middle. If you start him at the top of the key with a live dribble, then you clear the wings, you're able to really limit the gap help. So now Kawhi's operating in single coverage, making it much easier to get wherever he wants to go. In game 1, we saw a few possessions with this setup. They'd either empty the wings completely, or they'd start him on one wing with Harden on the other and a shooter in the strong side corner, meaning that no immediate defender is able to cheat over and sit in his lanes. Then he's able to do what he does best as an isolation creator. This is where he got most of his offense in game 2. Not even a minute into the game, he used a high ball screen to get the switch onto Jamal. They cleared out for him to operate in the middle of the floor, and he got deep into the paint before hitting a turnaround jumper. Here's another example from a few minutes later. He gets the Jamal switch, then instead of keeping that side empty, you're going to see Simmons move to the strong side block, which makes it harder for Jokic to commit to the ball. Then with Powell one pass away, Gordon isn't in a position to aggressively play the nail, as Kawhi once again gets to the paint for a short jumper. Time and time again, they set up the floor like this. Murray on Kawhi, emptying the wings to give him the middle of the floor, and then he easily gets to a spot where he can rise up for a bucket. And that's how you end up with a result like 10 of 11 from the mid-range. Because when you take away the gap help, now you can't stop him from getting wherever he wants to go. Then he's got the shot making to just absolutely torch you, which is what we saw when he hit that dagger in the final minute. He isolates Gordon from up top, Powell goes deep on the opposite wing to space to his left while Harden clears the right, and he gets to about the elbow before pulling up for a jumper to put them up by 3. So as far as Kawhi's Game 2 performance goes, I think it was a culmination of a few different things. The first is of course the fact that he's an all-time great scorer who had an unconscious night shooting the ball. When a guy's making every single jump shot, regardless of how he's being defended or where he's at, there's not much you can do, but the Clippers also made some tweaks to the way they set up the floor, whether that meant repositioning their weaker shooters to make it more difficult to bring help, or shifting Kawhi's touches to a different spot on the court to counter Denver's strategy of loading up early. And it'll be interesting to see what the Nuggets do defensively from here, because I do think they had a little bit of success with a couple of different looks. Remember, the idea behind emptying the wings is to eliminate help at the nail. One thing Denver tried was bringing Jokic up from the dunker to sit at the free throw line while Porter shifted one pass down, and that once again takes away Kawhi's space to attack, resulting in a pass to Dunn in the corner, who is then forced to make a play instead. They also tried a strategy for avoiding mismatches. Kawhi was looking to hunt for a favorable switch all night, and what you're going to see here is they give up the switch, only to come with a late double, which then turns into a switch, and now you're back to square one with your original matchups. Speaking of late doubles though, that's what I'd expect to see more of. And not just to get back to your original matchup, I mean to completely get the ball out of his hands and force somebody else to beat you. It feels like the only times they've been able to stop him from creating a good shot out of those middle of the floor isolations have been when they straight up trap him, as his first reaction is always to back way up, then move the ball to whoever's closest, regardless of whether or not it's an advantage. So we'll have to see if this is an adjustment the Nuggets make and what the Clippers would then do to counter. Because I know one thing for sure. If your game plan is to let Kawhi get the switch he wants, then leave him in single coverage from up top, this has a chance to be a very short series. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think's gonna happen in this series. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.